And then how can we have a brand that people trust and respect? And all of that surrounded by what do I need to do internally to build the right culture, hire the right people, train the right people. But it was typically, customer, profit, brand. Um, and what was really, really interesting is when you would kind of dig deeper into what was actually happening, you know, it was seldom that. Right. And so if you ask, the chief marketing officer, like, hey, you're investing a whole bunch of money with Google, what are you trying to accomplish? Well, we're trying to do X, Y, Z. And it was almost never about profits.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Darveau and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome Darveau, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan, and I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Great to see you again, Julienne. Before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcasts. Leave a review. Also check out our YouTube channel. This will all be in this episode's notes. And you can also go to narrative.com, narrativ.com/podcast to find all of our previous episodes. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Nicolas Darveau-Garneau. It brings me great joy to be able to use my French here, who's originally from Montreal. We'll call him Nick for the purposes of this interview. He is an AI expert, growth consultant, and speaker whose upcoming debut book is the reason we're talking today. And that book is called Be a Sequoia, Not a Bonsai, the seven growth secrets of the world's most successful companies. It is now out by a publisher, HarperCollins Leadership. Nick served as Google's former chief evangelist and advisor to more than 1,000 companies, which has put him at the cutting edge of technological development for over 25 years. His new book covers the principles behind exceptional corporate growth, revealing how the top 5% of companies think, act, and grow differently. Whether working for a Fortune 500 company, a local startup, or a nonprofit, this book provides a playbook for sustainable growth through low-risk, high-reward strategies. Nick also currently serves on the boards of directors for TMX Group, McEwen Mining, and Elida, and advises numerous companies on growth and AI strategy. He also teaches 2 executive education courses, AI in Marketing on the Elevator Platform, ELVTR, and AI in the Boardroom for the Institute of Corporate Directors, or ICD. All right, I can't wait to get into this conversation. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hey,
Welcome.
And thrilled to be here.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. So to kick us off, we're going to ask you a question that we ask of all of our guests when we kick off our interviews. And that is to please tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today, something that still influences you or informs your work mindset somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, I was born about 4 hours north of Montreal in a place called Chicoutimi, which is, frozen 9 months of the year, and people only speak French Canadian there. And I loved growing up there, but the mindset in that place sometimes was like, well, look, like the people in Montreal are difficult. They're very different from us. And then I moved to Montreal and love those people, and then they were like, well, those English Canadians in Toronto, those people are difficult. And so when I moved to Toronto, and I'm like, well, I'm loving this. And Toronto was like, well, those Americans down in New York are
Oh, yeah, always.
well, especially now. So then I moved to New York and in California, and I just like, this is amazing. And so, and I've since traveled the world, and it's really shaped what I believe the most. And I think we need a lot in today's world, which is this openness to new things and new ideas and new cultures. And I don't always do it perfectly in business, right? Sometimes I think I'm right and I'm closed-minded, but I try to be really open to new ideas and new things. especially honestly from really experienced people that mentor me, but also from younger people who
Mm,
think differently, have new ways to do things, and can really bring a lot of value to a company. So, and then when I met these 1,000 CEOs, this is one of the key differentiators. I mean, so many CEOs were like, "Tell me more. Like, how does this work? Why?" And then other CEOs were like, "We've already tried it, or it won't work for us, so that's not our experience." And and that usually doesn't bode well for the future of the company.
Mm,
mm,
That
interesting.
active learner versus the one who's has a preset script. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things that don't bode well for the future of a company, you've sat in many rooms with CEOs and executive teams, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that context and why you were sitting in those rooms. But I know that's informed this book and the kinds of patterns that you were seeing over and over again. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing and why you were in those rooms and what sorts of patterns did you see?
Yeah, no, I was this really fortunate to have this incredible role at Google where I was chief evangelist, and I had a team of evangelists working with me, and we welcomed some of the top companies in the world, Google's largest advertisers, from all over the world, that they would fly into Mountain View, come to our Partnerplex, which is this amazing building that Google has built for its partners. Typically bring most of their senior executives, and they would spend a day with Google, and I would go and spend an hour or two with the senior executives talking about overall strategy. Other members on my team would talk about, digital advertising, digital transformation, AI, and then there'd be other people from Google come in to talk about amazing things Google was doing. And so over the course of 5 years, I got to meet, 1,000 CEOs and CMOs and really see some patterns. It took me, leaving Google and spending a couple of years away to kind of start thinking about the patterns that I saw, but they became quite evident, in hindsight.
mm.
Interesting. And so, when you're seeing these patterns, what sort of rises to the surface in terms of things that I mean? I think in my introduction, I mentioned uh, revealing how the top 5% of companies think, act, and grow. So when you were in those rooms, what did you hear? What did you see?
Yeah, typically what I would do is ask the CEO like what's top of mind, like really trying to do a lot of
Mhm.
listening, right? What are you losing sleep at night over? How can Google help you the most? And then the CEO would typically really share some pretty exciting things, and they were typically around 3 or 4 topics. One was the customer, right? How can we delight the customer more? It was always top of mind for CEOs, for most CEOs. How can we improve our economics, right? How can we do better financially? How can we do this, over time? Like, how can we make sure that the company does well, not just today, but over the next 5 or 10 years? Some CEOs, would talk about that. Um, and then how can we have a brand that people trust and respect? And all of that surrounded by what do I need to do internally to build the right culture, hire the right people, train the right people. But it was typically, you know, customer, profit, brand.
Mhm.
Um, and what was really interesting is when you would kind of dig deeper into what was actually happening, uh, you know, it was seldom that, right? And so if you ask, the chief marketing officer, like, "Hey, you're investing a whole bunch of money with Google. Um, what are you trying to accomplish?" "Well, we're trying to do X, Y, Z." And it was almost never about profits.
Mm,
So what the CEO wanted, right, to delight the customer, build a better brand, and improve profitability. Uh, Very few people actually work on that stuff, and
Mhm.
the stories don't align, right? I know this is a leadership story talk. So one of the key things I noticed was that the stories are not aligned.
mm,
Mhm.
So I would spend a lot of time trying to align the stories, right? And so if you're in a product development group and you're trying to delight customers, what is your core KPI? Number of features we shipped. Well, that doesn't align, right?
mm,
Have you interviewed customers? Do you know what their goals are, right? Because the features are only there to drive customer success. which by the way is more important than customer happiness, right? Customer success
Mm.
is much more likely to predict a customer staying for the long term. So, what does this customer want to do, whether it's a large company or an individual? What is their job to be done, as Clay Christensen would say? Um, and then, what are you doing from a product perspective to deliver that? And so, that's the product team. A customer service. Well, what are you doing? Well, we're trying to answer as many calls as possible with the lowest amount of time possible. Well, okay, are you prioritizing your most valuable customers who are maybe the
Mm.
agents, right? So some companies do this and they answer their top customers 10 times faster than the average. And then marketing, right? You're investing a whole bunch of money. What are you trying to do? Well, we're trying to get as many leads as possible for the lowest cost per lead.
Mm.
Like, I can deliver you a million leads for that penny a lead, but none of these leads will ever drive business for you. That's just not the right metric. And
Mm.
so we would spend a lot of time just aligning people and making sure that what the CEO was trying to do was actually being delivered. And the number one thing, the first thing that we would do is try to align everybody on profitability, right? We're
Mm.
trying to drive profits. So what is the metric that I can look at? And by doing this, now we saw some companies were investing, a lot of money with Google, improve the profitability of that investment by 30 to 70% overnight.
Mhm.
Right? So by just changing the KPI that's inside the Google advertising system,
Mm.
next thing you know, 50, 75, $100 million of profit showed up. And so that was the most important thing is just the alignment of the stories between the CEO strategy and what was actually happening on the ground.
Mm.
And it was interesting when I was reading your book that you had the gift of you built a relationship with your clients first, but then you gave them the gift of honest feedback and insights of things that were hiding in plain sight. There was one exam. Don't ask me which company it was, but there was millions of pieces of paper floating out and pamphlets and everything. You're saying, but there's a disparity of that return, and you do it quite clearly through throughout this book and then in your examples. But all of that is earned with trust and listening. It doesn't just happen because you come in with statistics and
Mm.
predictions for them. So I thought it was so interesting. So anybody reading this, you're going to learn a lot about the backstories of how all these brands seem to have magically appeared over the last few years. And you explain how and why they got there and why they developed traction or why they didn't.
Mm.
Yeah, there's more than
It's
300
like a
case.
big mystery novel
Yeah, I
of
know.
business in the States.
There's more than 300, case studies in the book. And then there's also really practical, right? So it just tells you step by step exactly how to do something. So every chapter has got a big idea that can drive
Hmm.
massive change for a company, but a very inexpensive, low risk way to test it, and then step by
Mm.
step. So that's actually one of the most important things in terms of the advice I would give to executives, right? Um, I would listen to them a lot. I would ask a bunch of questions, and then within an hour, I would have three very large ideas that could be very transformational, and then I would make the CEO feel like, and rightly so, that these ideas were actually relatively simple to at least try, right? And so in my consulting practice today, that's what I do. And I only do, by the way, I only do five clients a year. I'm kind of semi-retired. Um, and this is really listening, really understanding what the company is doing, and then finding three ideas they can do, and then finding the absolute simplest way and least expensive way to test. So even smaller companies can do this. Anybody can do this.
Mm.
Like the last story of the book is actually from a gym
Mm.
that is so successful that they made 28 times more profitability per customer than the average gym, right? And they just
Mm.
do a sort of really interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really this idea of really listening to the CEO, and then finding three big things that can be tested very inexpensively. So in my consulting practice, I do this now, and the idea of like a big idea with a small risk really resonates with executives.
Mm.
So I was a good student. This one I remember. So with Zappos, the shoe company, I was reading because there's 272 pages in this book. So I'm reading. I want to be prepped. I didn't just want to recover and back. And when I got to the example, when he said the executive went to a shoe store, bought shoes, put them in a box, and mailed them to test the concept. And I'm like, that's so simple and it's genius.
Yeah,
And that's
here's
how it started. Oh my goodness. And
yeah,
you're giving that as example, like it doesn't have to be rocket science.
Mm.
Just
it doesn't
to
have to
see
be, right?
what happens.
And
Yeah.
so that's one of the core ideas of the book, in addition to profitability, is customer lifetime value, which
Mm-hmm.
is long-term profits for the individual customer, right? So if the three of us, applied for car insurance, for example, the odds are that our value will be quite different for this car insurance company, right? One of us might have a claim. One of us may, leave the car insurance company really quickly. And so the best companies in the world understand that typically for most industries, right, 20% of customers drive 80% of the profits. And they're extraordinary at acquiring these customers. Fewer than 1% of companies in the world do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really understanding, how to forecast the value of an individual customer and how to plug that into, a digital advertising program, for example. So in the book, there's a case study of a company called Surex, Surex, from Canada, and they used to acquire customers for car insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and they build an algorithm to forecast from 1 to 10 how valuable each customer would be in the future. And then they would send that back to Google and Facebook and other digital platforms, so that these platforms would start to learn what customers are valuable, which ones are not, and then over time would advertise more aggressively to the better customers and less to the least desirable customers. And so that company within a year acquired 60% fewer very unprofitable customers and 90% more very profitable customers, and quadrupled its profits.
Mm.
Right. So that concept of not just looking at your financial statements, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we sold this much today. We were this profitable today. But starting with your customer base, right? You look at each individual customer. How much money have we made in the past from each? How much money are we going to make in the future from each? Understanding how concentrated your profits are. My goodness, 15% of customers drive 95% of our profits. We didn't know that. By the way, only about 25% of CEOs know that.
Mm.
And then asking the next question, which is, okay, like, what do these customers eat for breakfast? Like, what do they like, right? Fewer than 5% of CEOs know that. And so can you identify your most valuable customers? What percentage of your profits do they drive? And what are the three things about them that you know that are the most interesting?
Mm.
And then do you have a customer acquisition strategy to find more people like that?
Mm.
I mean, it's just not a thing, right? And so just doing that, imagine if you're doing this, right? And your competitors don't do that, and you're just acquiring any customer, um, you're going to be way, way better off. So
Yeah.
that was a second, like the first one was profitability. The second one is long-term profitability based on the value of each individual customer.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
playing the long game is not something you hear all the times, but recently. But I do appreciate, and that anybody's reading it. There's a great lessons learned for people who are involved in non-for-profits and how to look at the donor equation. So this is for businesses as well as not-for-profits. So I think that's a great gift to the community
Yeah,
that you created.
I was really fortunate to work with St. Jude's,
Mm,
and they were really kind to agree to be in the book. And so St. Jude's is an extraordinary organization, actually the most respected organization in the U.S. and the number one destination that college graduates want to work. And they've built
mm,
this over time by doing amazing work, of course. Um, but they've also increased their donations from $1 billion a year, a few years ago, to 2.5 billion
mm,
now. So they are very thoughtful about, how they align their stories, right? What messages they send out to the market, how they think about, the KPIs for fundraising. And they're so good at fundraising that they now have built a class to help other
really.
nonprofits, raise money themselves, right? And
Yeah.
so just really honored to have worked with them and to see they're already really good at fundraising, but to go from 1 billion to 2.5 billion, partly with Google's help,
Mm.
was maybe the most important thing I've ever done in my career, and I'm the most honored to have done.
Yeah. And am I right in saying that some of the proceeds of the book are going to go to s-
All of them.
St.
So all the money I
All?
make,
Wow.
I've already made some money because I get paid up front, right? You get paid in advance, and I've got
Right.
some costs, right, of promotions and so on. But I'm hoping to donate in excess of $100,000 to St. Jude's.
Wow.
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing.
If the book sells, right?
Well, hey, but that's what we're
All
here
right.
for.
We have a
So,
purpose now. Okay.
You always like you hear like, "Well, this isn't curing cancer." This is curing
There you
cancer.
there
go.
you go.
That's
Be a
true.
Sequoia, not a bonsai, and you're helping to. By the way, cancer is the 5-year life expectancy, of a child getting cancer in the U.S. Has gone from 20% to now, 80%. But it's still 20% in many parts of the world. So St. Jude's is also, I mean, they raise money from over 100 countries. It's not just, I mean, it's a Memphis, Tennessee-based organization that is now worldwide
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
they really thought brilliantly, very broad from the beginning. Um, and so they're actually doing a lot of work to help nonprofits around the world. They're doing a lot of research. One of their top goals is to make the rest of the world match the survival rate of the US in the next 2 years.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Amazing. Yeah.
Thank
The
you.
the most like the one thing that predicts the odds of how long a child's gonna live with cancer is where they live,
Mm,
fortunately, right? So there's
Oh,
so
nice.
many people who are less fortunate than we are,
yeah.
and St. Jude's is working hard to equalize that around the world.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Thank
amazing
you.
that you've decided to do that and had a role in contributing to their growth as well. Um, so there's something that's been on my mind since the beginning of this interview, which is that image, which is a great image of the sequoia and the bonsai. How did you come up with that? What and can you tell us a little bit more about what's behind that?
Yeah, so sequoias are the largest trees in the world, actually the largest living things in the world by volume, right? The amount of water they can hold compared to a gray whale, for example. And they live for 3,000 years. Um, and what's not known about them is that they actually grow faster as they get older because they kind of,
Oh.
they get out of the forest canopy and get more light. But sequoias get all sorts of problems, right? Their trunks split, they're kind of gnarly looking. They're not perfect. They just grow. And then a bonsai is a beautiful tree that is trimmed by humans, right? And it never grows past 13 feet. That's the tallest bonsai in the world. And so in business, the analogy is like some companies are not always perfect, meaning they're willing to test a bunch of things that are not going to work,
Mm,
right? So they're open minded to trying stuff. And then they are looking for profitable growth. Like they just like, that's like, you've never shrunk to greatness. So yes, they're trying to lower, they're trying to maintain their cost structure in the right way. They're not trying to be, spending frivolous amount of money, but they are looking for profitable growth, in the long term, customer lifetime value. Whereas the bonsai is always worried about testing something that costs $50,000 because, their numbers will look a little bit worse for a quarter. And so they never try stuff. So and a good analogy is I was talking to executives in the movie industry, and Google had this advertising tool that you can use to drive people to a movie theater. And you know that they've been to the movie theater because Google can see that, and you know the approximate cost to drive somebody to a movie theater. So, for example, you can do an advertising campaign and see that 1 million people were influenced to go to the movie theater, and it costs you 50 cents per movie theater visit. So, some executives would be like, "This is amazing! I mean, what? This is magic! So here's $100,000 for my next movie. Let's see if it works." And it did work, and they did more, and they grew. Um, and then some executives were like, "Well, how do you calculate this? How do we know they saw our movie at a theater? They didn't go to some other, like,
This is true.
well, look, they saw a trailer of your movie. And then they went to the theater 3 days later. The odds are really high. Like, can we
mhm,
try it?" So they're over intellectualizing, like trying
Mm.
to be smart as opposed to trying to make it work. And that's another, like, that's just the kind of there's an open mindedness versus closed mindedness aspect. And then there's an intellectual versus practical aspect of executives. The practical is, sounds reasonable. Can we test this for $10,000? Yes. Okay. Versus like, let's debate it and see who's smarter and who can, trip the other person as
mm,
opposed to trying it. And then so the former tries a lot more things. And then the latter doesn't try as many things. And by the way, I think in the age of AI, as AI probably commoditizes quite a few things inside businesses, Marketing will be fairly
Hmm.
similar. Product development will get better. So, like, imagine companies getting better across the board, even smaller companies being able to do a lot of things they couldn't do. My my analysis suggests that the most important thing going forward and the only kind of sustainable competitive advantage is how fast you move and how many tests you run,
Hmm.
right? And so, if you just do a lot of tests and you move really quickly, you're going to outcompete somebody that is going to overthinks everything and takes 6 months to try something. And so there's a whole chapter in the book about how do you go from doing very few tests to doing 100 times more tests within 2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
And that, I think, becomes really, really powerful.
Yeah.
There's a memorable example you give about a company that looked like they turned testing into a varsity sport. They had departments. They were like, "Come on, give us something. We fixed all that. Like, give us another one." So it just and how they were doing it, and they were giving awards for thinking, not for successful. But like the fact you took a risk and you said something, you tried something. So I thought that was pretty amazing
Yeah,
because
they
you're
would.
right. People do shut it down a lot of times before you even
Yeah,
get off out of the conference room.
yeah, they would ask employees for their ideas to improve experience of the customer and or the profitability of the company. The CEO on a monthly basis would donate a prize to the top 3 ideas, and the prizes were given before the ideas were tested. It
Hmm.
didn't matter if it
Ah,
worked or not.
that's
It
true.
was
That's right. I
it
remember
was really like,
reading that. Okay.
if this idea were to work, would the customer be at a whole different level of success, and would a company be way better off? Yes or no? And so that was a criteria, and it really opened up the aperture of what was possible because you don't care if it's going to work. You're just generating ideas. And so the number of ideas, can you imagine, like, you have this
Mhm.
spreadsheet that anybody can access. They can put up an idea and they can win 10, 15, $20,000 and get a
All
prize
right.
for the whole company, right?
Jerome's eyebrows just shot up.
So the
Well,
number of ideas skyrocketed.
but the reason is that's cultural, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's you're describing two different cultures. One that's over intellectualizing and doing fewer tests, and the other one that's much more open minded to testing things for the sake of testing and actually even rewarding the number of tests they'll have. That's their metric. It's not actually whether the test is going to work or not. And I guess that gets me to a question I had about culture and the role of culture in whether companies to bring it to some of the issues that we're seeing today, around AI investment and general digital investment as well. What do you think that role is in terms of culture influencing whether companies actually convert digital or AI investment into results?
Yeah, and I've done so much of this, right? Digital transformation, whether it was going from traditional marketing to digital marketing, whether it was building a much better website or app experience for customers, whether it's implementing more AI internally or externally. My experience, almost all the successes are CEO led.
Mm,
Meaning, if you want to really transform how you think and how you approach the customer, for example, right? If you're going to rebuild an amazing digital experience, 99% of companies will build that experience based on what the results they see from an average visitor to the website. They look at something like conversion rate. What percentage of customers do something on the site that we care about?
Mhm.
That's actually a really bad metric,
mm,
right? If 20% of customers drive 90% of your profits, what you really care about is the profitability per visit, right? And then how happy the customer is, net promoter score or something like that. Very, very few executives will design a customer experience for the top customers. And so the CEO's got to grasp all of this, right? Hey, 15% of our customers drive 90% of our profits. The experience they want is very different from the average experience. We don't have it today. We need to change that. We can use AI to do it. Okay, I get it. Like I grok it. I could see the future, right? Makes total sense. Okay, I need to paint that vision. I need to make it non-optional, right? And so I'm going to describe that. And then the next step is typically it's very hard to change the culture across multiple divisions to make all this stuff happen. So you want to build a multidisciplinary team, right?
mm,
That is gung ho about doing this. Give them one KPI, one thing, right? And then give them the resources to do it. And they're just tasked full time with making that happen. If it's dispersed everywhere, the odds of happening are very, very low. right? And so they build this thing, right? And then they continuously test it to optimize it. So you should have a center. And so that team begins the shift of the culture to more customer centricity, for example, or more digital or more AI, right? And then once the success starts to be clear, then if you're outside that team and you see what's happened there and how much praise you're getting from the CEO, you're going to follow suit. So it's really like the CEO has to really paint the vision and then create a team whose full-time job is to make that vision happen.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's the evangelists, right?
Mhm.
That's who you want on your team, and it's interesting. Full circle from your title as former chief evangelist officer. I get that now, and or ambassadors is another. We hear those kinds of terms, but you've just painted it in a very specific way that people can understand. I appreciate that. We're getting very close to the end of our interview. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. But I'd love to ask you one last question, which is, for those who are looking at digital transformation and maybe they're faced with thousand options or different things they could do. What do you think is one small thing they could start to put in place so that it kind of gives them the confidence that they can see results or outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, let's take an example of AI, right?
Mm,
AI is scary for a lot of people. And I understand why, right? And so if you're deploying AI inside your company, find the first use case that has low risk. You're not going to get in trouble. Um, it's going to work and it's going to delight, employees, right?
mm,
So, for example, using AI to do expenses,
mm,
Mm.
right?
mm,
Employees don't even know, don't have to know it's AI. It's just expenses went from taking me half an hour to taking me 2 minutes, and it
mm,
works.
mm,
Ah, so find use cases that are really low risk and employees are going to love. Don't start with really transformational stuff that has
Mm.
really high risk for employees. Advice number two is when you're talking about digital transformation or AI transformation, the obvious concern employees have is their job. So you really should do three things. One is you should paint a future of growth. Hey, look, we're going to use AI to double the size of the company in the next 5 years, and we want to employ 30% more people. That's the vision, right? It's not we're going to gain productivity. Like productivity is, so that's one. And then two, once you've painted that vision of the future, you have to tell, every employee whether or not they need to really learn AI. Some
Mm.
employees, it won't be that relevant. Some employees will be critical. So you have to be clear and you have to give them that training. You have to help them,
mm,
right? And then third, employees are smart. They know that, as AI gets better and better, some of the things they do that are the lower value, activities are going to get eaten up by AI, and that's going to continue to climb into the mid value and then the higher value. And so you have to create a job ladder that explains to each employee whose job, if they're going to learn AI, they're going to use the AI tools.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the deal, right? And if they don't, maybe they're not going to stay. But if they do, they're going to get promoted. They're going to get promoted to this type of job. This is still ahead of AI, right? AI can't do it yet, right? So as you explain this transformation, you make employees feel that AI will never never catch up to them, which I believe, by the way. I don't think AI can do everything a human can do. Um, but you have to take, a huge amount of effort to take your more junior employees and over time give them more wisdom, give them more judgment so that the AI can do the grunt work, but they can be the arbiters of the right decisions to make using their judgment and wisdom, which AI doesn't have a lot of. So start small, talk about a picture of growth, tell employees which ones are really expected to and put this part of their comp, the performance reviews, right? AI is a big part of it, but also paint them a future career uh,
mm,
uh, projection that is very, very inspiring. And then the last thing I would say is don't make the mistake that some companies are making today of not hiring young people,
mm,
right? It is catastrophic in my opinion to do that because young people bring in new ideas,
Mhm.
um, one, and two, if you don't do that, where are you going to be 5 years from now? right? So you need to, and some of these young people are the best AI people there is, right? So don't make the mistake of thinking, you can replace your most junior employees with AI. No, keep your internships. Keep hiring from colleges and universities. Keep hiring people from the trades, um, because it's going to catch up to you in the medium term.
Love it.
And Jerome, I know you brought this term up, and we can reuse one of your terms so many times. In this case, the story aligner.
Mhm.
That where does somebody fit in the story? Just like you're asking your clients to say, where does your product fit in the story, or where the client group? So I think that's a good phrase we're going to borrow and
Yeah,
keep
I love that.
and keep repurposing it for us.
Yeah, it's all about alignment. Well, wonderful. As always, I wish we had more time,
Hmm.
but this was really fantastic. We were really practical about it as well. I highly encourage everyone to find the book "Be a Sequoia, Not a Bonsai: 7 Growth Secrets of the World's Most Successful Companies." We will have links actually in our episode notes where you can find how to find the book, as well as other resources and links to learn more about Nick's work, and what he's doing and some of the things that he talked about today. So thank you so much, Nick, for being with us today. Thanks, Julienne, for being my wonderful co-host, and
My
thank you
pleasure.
all. Thank you all for listening. As always, I'm going to remind everybody to go and review our podcast wherever you find your podcast. Remember to subscribe as well so you don't miss a single episode. And finally, go to the website, narrative.com, NARATIV.com, if you would like to enroll yourself in programs that teach you how to tell your story and listen and really create a space in which that alignment that we talked about today is possible. That's what we're all about, and we're always happy to listen to you. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. Again, that's narrative.com, NARATIV.com. And with that, I'm going to wish you all an excellent time. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.